So, happy Sunday to everybody. It's Streaming Sunday yet again, third week in a row. Probably one of our records. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody here for joining out. Obviously, it's starting to definitely get more of a crowd up on these Sunday evenings. And for those of you that are just coming from Hacking Health, welcome. Good to see you guys out here. I know a couple of attendees of that this past weekend were unfortunately not able to make it out. They'll likely be catching this later. So shout out to those guys. Hey, everybody there. Hope you guys got home all right. And to Day Job Doc and Girl Geeks Toronto, awesome. You guys are really pitching it there, helping get the word out. So thanks to you guys. So yeah, welcome to everybody. Obviously, getting to be a bit bigger events, and hopefully with content like we have planned for tonight, we'll see this be growing even more. So without further ado, just diving right into it with a couple of announcements first. I thought you got me. Just wanted to give a quick mention to one thing that's coming up, actually, is the Day Job Doc. For anybody who doesn't know, is a documentary that was made by a bunch of people here in Toronto, as well as a producer, a colleague of mine, a friend of mine who's a producer. They have their screenings that are going on. Their intro was a little while ago. Day Job Doc is coming back to Toronto on December 12th. So tickets are on sale. Grab a ticket quick. I do recommend checking this out if you're in the startup industry or want to see what it is all about. Take a look at dayjobdoc.com. Tickets are on sale now. It's only $12 for early bird general. Get it. Hosted at the Bloor there. There's a place there. So with that being said, I'd like to see about diving in. So first and foremost, welcome, as I was saying earlier. My name, Matthew Potter. I run the HTML Toronto group. If you want to be involved, if you want to come out to the events, we run monthly meetups. I'm putting one together for this month, possibly at a new venue and possibly at a new location that's actually a restaurant that's opening up. Might be a bit smaller, compact, but the restaurant's looking to do some live streaming, and I'm helping set their platform up. So pay close attention to that. Next thing up that I want to bring up is keep an eye out for an email that's coming from me very, very shortly. A bunch of the Toronto tech groups, meetup groups, and communities are getting together. We're going to be running an end-of-year celebration. So it's not a holiday event because I know a lot of us are celebrating multiple different holidays. But what it is it's a celebration and a recognition for such a great year. Toronto and the developer community and the startup community has had an absolutely outstanding year. We're looking to do a congratulatory massive event. From the sounds of it and from the looks of it and what we're planning, it's going to be at the courthouse. The date, tentatively, I'll let you guys know who are watching this and who catch us afterwards, is going to be December 3rd, but we're still making sure that has to be absolutely verified. But it's recognition, really. It's a recognition for you guys. Recognition for the community for being absolutely outstanding. And what we're also doing is we're inviting all of the sponsors that have sponsored all of the different groups and all of the venues that have supported us and had us there. And we're making sure that we're giving them recognition. Because without them, it truly would not have been able to be such an amazing year. We've had so many hackathons. We've had so many different events. We've had just massive success as a city as a whole, and it's all thanks to you guys and the people who support us. So please pay attention to that. It will be a charge for the event. However, what we're going to be doing is taking all the proceeds, absolutely everything above and beyond the cost of the actual venue, the beers, the drinks, the food, and everything else. Every dime of that will be going to the Ho Ho To brand. So there's a brand new crew that's running that. We're already in touch with them. They're doing an amazing job this year again, and we'll be doing it under that brand as well. That avenue, we'll be donating all the stuff to the food bank under the Ho Ho To brand. So pay close attention. Cool. Other than that, what we're going to be doing today is diving in and looking at how we can use something like Websockets and CSS together. Now, many of you may not know what Websockets is. It's one of the things in JavaScript under the HTML5 brand or synonym of the 8 different things, right? You have the connectivity, which is WebSockets. You might have noticed it in the icon for this video, that little tiny plug thing that doesn't look, the plug thing that you put, anyway. That is meaning connectivity. It's part of the HTML5 specification. As well, the HTML5 spec also has CSS3. Now the CSS, this isn't really specifically CSS, it's, sorry, CSS3, this is CSS in general. In fact, to do some of the CSS3 stuff with the prefix is a bit complex, but absolutely possible. So let's take a quick look at what, first and foremost, socket is and WebSockets are in general. So I'm going to jump over to this computer here and this camera. So first and foremost, welcome to everybody in the stream. I think there's a bunch of people watching live. If I can, I was going to say, who is, can somebody give me a shout out whether or not they can hear properly? I'll wait for 30 seconds for that because I know there's like a 37-second delay. Somebody in the comments, you don't have to share to YouTube, to the Google Plus method, but can you give me a shout out on whether or not this is actually working for audio? I know last time, and I apologize for this, the audio wasn't synced up properly, and I want to make sure that we're all good here. I have tested, but I want to make sure. And for that, and a bit of the time delay here, the reason for that was because I was using multiple platforms to stream from. I now have a single application that I can do this from, much higher quality, much higher end, thanks to the people at Telestream Wirecast for that. So big shout out for those guys. And we'll be getting a license for that this week or next, depending upon some things internally. So quick mention for the shout out for those. Anybody? I believe it is anyway. Let me actually. Yep, cool. Sounds like it is. Anyway, that being said, let's take a quick look at what mute there at what WebSockets are. So WebSockets. Generally what ends up happening is you have a bit of a server that runs Node.js in most cases. You can use other platforms, you can use other systems, even PHP, latest versions of PHP have a method of connecting via or maintaining a persistent connection. However, WebSockets in general are generally done through Node.js and a JavaScript-based server. So in this case here, what we have Node.js running with Socket.io in the background as the kind of framework that you're putting sockets through. Sockets themselves are not Socket.io. They are a technology or a framework, that a method in which you're communicating between different servers. Socket.io has just been so amazing at providing the methods that you would generally have to write by hand to do so. So people use that, and it's become somewhat of a standard. So we have a Socket.io listening on a server. This server is listening at port 557,800. It's listening to just that port number. What that means is it's not going over the same port as, say, HTML is, which is port 80, and it's a very, very high unused port. This is for demonstration, and likely because what I'm going to be doing is continually having different things on the go on this specific server, ready in case anybody comes onto the site afterwards and wants to play around with it. So don't mind the fact that this is a very high number and it's listening to a very high area. Just know that the reason behind that is because I want to make sure that this is always running in the background for anybody in the future. You can generally do this on a lower port number or a smaller custom one, or in some cases you can run this as an actual web server on port 80 and it can serve up. We'll get into that another day when we're setting up or trying out a Node.js server for your actual platform, if we ever get to that level. But for this case, we're just listening to this port. I'll show you what we're done with HTML in a moment. So on that note, what we're doing is we're listening for any connection, right? Any connection that happens, we're just saying, hey, if ever you get something that's an event that somebody transmits to you that is labeled submit update layout, then do the following function, right? In this case, take all the sockets and everything that's there and emit an update layout using the exact same data. We're not even parsing it, we're not doing anything with it, we're not validating the data, and I'm going to tell you right now, dangerous. In fact, I'm probably going to go through here and just make sure that I'm not going to be passing through malicious code eventually. But if you're ever doing a website, don't just directly say, hey, I'm going to grab the data and push it out. We're just using this as an example. And because this is very rudimentary code, and I know the stuff that we're going to be doing with this is not going to be malicious, it's not going to be damaging to the server. So generally you would parse and clean this. In this case, you don't have to. All of this code will all be downloadable as well. In fact, if anybody's intuitive enough, they would have already gone down to the description of the YouTube video and clicked on the insert or read more and seen a couple of links down there. One of which is the link to the GitHub repo for all the code. The other one is a link to the live one, which, in fact, if you want, I can put on here for anybody that is on the live stream right now. It is this code. So if you want to jump to this, you can jump ahead, see some of the code, but I will be walking through a lot of the stuff and a lot of the code prior, and then we'll go around and we'll play with it. So you can pause that, you can take a look at it. Otherwise, I'm going to jump back into some of the code. So the code that we have that's going on here, this is the server side. Very little done to the server, not a lot needed. Just basically saying, hey, I've got something, I'm going to pass it out to everybody else. Very dangerous for other things, very simple for this. The next thing we have an HTML page. Now, I'll go over some of the reasonings behind this a little later on, but this HTML page is only a few things, right? So if I jump over to the page itself, this page is what the HTML presents, right? We have a giant paragraph worth of text or a bunch of paragraphs. Is this? Yeah, okay. Bunch of paragraph of content here, and then we have a bit of a controller on the one side, right? On the left-hand side. So the controller we'll get into in a moment, but the controller will allow us to adjust some of the CSS on the fly. So let's jump into some of this code. In the client, here's where we get some of the fun stuff. In the HTML, we have just a couple little things, including controllers for different elements of the data, right? In the actual HTML you'll be modifying and changing, there's very simple. I have an ID of primary content and then a bunch of paragraphs in that. That's all there is. There's no fancifulness, there's no nothing aside from that. The form here that we have is purely the form that we'll be modifying and editing that the JavaScript will go through and change. So there's no fancy trickery, there's no extra added on content, it's just this is the only thing that will be changing, this primary content with paragraphs inside. What we're doing is we're loading up the socket IO, right? So we need to load a piece of script for all of the socket connections, connect to the server, make sure we have all the instructions for that, right? So that's that one. And then we have a client.js that's being loaded, which is my JavaScript or your JavaScript that you'll likely implement or you want to test with. So let's jump into that client.js right now. In that client.js, I've gone through and I've commented all the stuff. So if you want to dive into it, both on GitHub and on the site, it's all commented. And I've gone a bit overboard on the commenting just to make sure that you understand what each line does. Generally, you don't comment every single line. You would comment blocks of code so that every block is a thing that you get instructions for. Anytime I try to provide you with instructions or with code snippets, what I will do as much as possible, I will try to comment every line, and I will also do long form. So what I mean by that is, as an example for here, this loop through, right? Most of us have seen JavaScript based for and ifs and whatnot. What I'm going to do, although this can be written for var I equals 0 I plus plus, right? You can write it this way, right? So this is a method that you can write. I'm going to write this so that it follows along with lint standards. So I plus 1, okay? And I'm going to be declaring all of my variables ahead of time. This way, it's following a standard. If you pass this through a JavaScript validation engine, the code that I provide for JavaScript should, for the most part, always validate for you. So all of the stuff is very clean and easy to read. So that being said, so let's get into the code here. We have a connection, so we're connecting to the server, right? We have the URL that we're connecting to, including the port number that it's listening on. We have CSS rules, which is that key thing that this whole tonight and this whole talk is actually going to be focused on, which is all browsers maintain all of the CSS rules within a variable within the document that's called style sheets, right? So style sheets, the S in sheets is capitalized, being camel case. And then in this case, because I know that the style sheet that's being modified is the first one, I'm going to be saying all the CSS rules grab the first array element of the style sheets object, or the style sheets array, sorry, and grab only the rules in that. So if I jump into something like, I see some people playing with that. If I jump into some of the JavaScript console here, right, increase this a bit. If I say document dot style sheets, right, I'm seeing a list, and right now there's one item. So we're going to grab that first item. But what's interesting is that first item has a bunch of different things available for you. The disabled, the CSS rules, the media, the owner, all these different things are available to you to see and capture and read. And then some of that's actually writable. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be taking this style sheet, this first element in the style sheet, capturing the CSS rules, right? So if I open this up, you're going to see CSS rules, and it's going to be saying for each one of these, let's say what the CSS text is, or what technically the selector is going to be, match that up with what we want, and then go through the style and find the rule that applies to what we're doing, right? All the information's here in JavaScript for you. All we're going to end up doing is looping through some of the stuff and controlling that remotely. So I do see a bunch of you guys playing with this already, which is great. That's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. I encourage that. Please, if you can do that more, absolutely. But I'm going to continue going through this. So that's CSS rules. We're capturing that first set of style sheets. We're capturing that file, and we're going to capture the rules in that file and save that to memory. Right? This way, we're not always going back to this. We're storing that as a variable in JavaScript, and it's a hot selection. It's not something that's we're setting it as it's capturing. One of the things that you have to be sure, though, and I want to make sure that I'm mentioning this to you now, is that when you're capturing that, all the style sheets, or at least the style sheets that you want to be grabbing, are already loaded. Right? Yeah, it is. Whatever. Is already loaded. So if you're grabbing and if you're doing things with JavaScript before all the scripts have loaded, or if you load your JavaScript at the top before a CSS file, those CSS styles might not be already created. They might not be loaded yet. So when you're doing this, you have to be careful and ensure that all of your styles have already preloaded before you assign the JavaScript object to that. Otherwise, it's just not going to have that available for you. So that's that. The all layout inputs, I'm using the new method of capturing all of the different elements that we're going to be needing to control things via JavaScript's query selector all, and using rel equals layout controllers. So this is kind of every one of my controllers, every one of the every one of the elements that we're using to control a document. So all of those elements on the left-hand side, they all have a rel of layout controllers. Right? This is kind of a grouping for me to do. Doesn't matter what it is. It can be a select object, can be a input, a text select, all those different things. And then what we're going to do is we're going to capture those and assign an event listener to them a little later on. And then we have a couple of the functions or methods that we're going to be using that I've pre-given global variable names for, and I'm just declaring those here. Again, making sure that we're doing all the standards that we're finding, and we're using JavaScript strict method of programming here. So, continuing on into the script, I'm going to start describing some of the methods. We have remote update layout as a function, which again you'll see in the comments here. This is all the actions that's being performed. What this remote update layout is when it gets instructions from some other server or from the server from the socket connection, here's the actions to do, right? We're passing a single variable to it, which is called adjustments, right? And then we're looping through all the different CSS rules. So those CSS rules that we captured, we're going to loop through every one of those. We're going to say, is the CSS rule selector text the same as the selector text of the adjustment? If it is, change the style or the attribute of that style, like whatever it is that it's capturing, set the value of that attribute to the new value, right? So very, very simply, just if the matching or if the CSS rule selector is the same as the adjustment selector, so the one that gets passed in, that selector text is an object, then take the style of that rule, grab the adjustment or the attribute for that, like the attribute that you're doing. So if it's, for instance, background color, then background color is the attribute or the named array item of the style, and adjust the value of it to be the new value that you pass into it. Very simple. It's going to continue looping as well. So that's something to take note as well. I'm not putting a break. You would generally put a break in a for if you find something. However, as some of you probably know, if you have multiple CSS rules that are cascading style sheets, and then at the very top you find, hey, here's my A tag, right? Here's an A tag, here's a bunch of stuff to it. You might find down later on down below, if not a bad programmer, but a lazy one, or you're still developing or whatever, you might put another A tag at the bottom. Well, you want to make sure that you're capturing the one that's going to be affecting it. So I'm not going to make adjustments to only one. I'm going to make adjustments to all of them. And in fact, a good rule of thumb, so long as you're not doing a lot of different rules, you would also loop through all of the CSS rules that you have in the document, but that does take more time. That would ensure that if you have multiple layout adjustments coming from, say, Bootstrap, jQuery Mobile, your own CSS files, that all of those get adjusted, or at least the one that you're trying to target does get adjusted. Best practice is really find out what style sheets that you want to be changing and change only those, and give it access only to those though. So next up is the prepare the form elements. So the prepare the form elements is, remember that capturing of the input all layout inputs? Well, I'm going through here and I'm looping through every one of them, and what I'm doing is, if it exists, I'm saying add event listener, right? So anytime an event happens to that single object, in this case changing, update the layout. And update the layout is what we'll go through next. If in some browsers the add event listener is not available, then we use the attach event. Attach event is slightly different. IE needs this. This is also something where I chose specifically not to say all layout inputs I.change equals this, because using something like add event listener and attach event means that you can have multiple things occur at the same time. So it's always best practice to make sure that you're using the proper one, instead of saying just, oh, button.click equals perform this action. You should use the event listeners, because those event listeners can be added to, taken away from, without impacting other things, right? So if you have multiple things happening to a single button, you don't want to be saying, oh, I'm going to change the just complete click event of this to something else, right? You want to say on click do this, because something else might try to do it as well. Especially if you're doing analytics. Analytics are a big thing. You want to make sure that you're adding into an event listener if you're doing analytics, so that all the click event happens. So all I'm doing here is I'm attaching the update layout to a change of any of those elements. That update layout is where all of the magic happens. And I say magic, and no pun intended with the last name Potter, but that is where the magic happens. So the update layout, I'm going to say take the event. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, when you do a change or a click or anything, it passes the event through as a variable. And you'll notice the updated layout doesn't have the open and close parentheses, it's just an empty one. What that means is that I'm taking that variable, in this case the update layout, and I'm assigning it to that thing. I'm not saying run it, I'm assigning it to it instead, meaning it's only going to run when that change happens. So it's going to pass through the EVT, or the event of that, and then what I'm going to be doing, as you see I'm declaring all my variables, what it's going to end up doing is it's going to say, hey, does the event.target, which is the DOM element itself, have data set or not? Now, data set, for anybody, again, doesn't know, if you've ever seen the attribute data-blah, that's the data set of a DOM object, right? So in this case, we do have several different data sets. And this is where I was saying, I want to go through some of this stuff when we're going through the JavaScript. In each one of the inputs, we have several different attributes. We have an ID, for good reason, so we can assign a label to it. Again, label all of your inputs. Accessibility, my friends. We have a type. In this case, as some of you may see, the type is going to be color, right? So if the attribute, or if the browser allows for an input type of color, assign that. Otherwise, it just falls back to a text element, or text input type. We have the rel that we were assigning to, let me make sure that's big enough. We have that rel that is all of the different ones have, which is that layout controllers, so it captures it in that initial thing. And then we have these three different data set elements, right? We have a target, we have an attribute, and we have a type. So the target is what we want to capture and what we want to send this data to. In this case, I'm saying primary content. After that, we have attribute. background color. That's what we want to change. Type is color. So the type in this case, I'm assigning it, but it's not being used. So the data type of color, although first and foremost, I know it's the EUS spelling, but we're working in the web, so please don't blame me. The type, in some cases, we want to make sure that that changes to either a percentage, a pixel base, or even a URL. But the input type itself generally doesn't have that type of method that we can pass through. So I'm assigning that to a dataset item. So as you'll see down below here, we have the rel target attribute type. This one's a pixel, or px. Now, the input type is a number, and I'm saying it's a data type of px, so that when I get to the client, later on, after I'm capturing, as you see, capturing the data set, or if again the browser's not capable of having data set, I'm using the get attribute, trying to force the good practice of using something like a data set beforehand. But after I capture that, I'm saying take whatever that type is and then do something with it. For instance, pixels, you would add px to the end of that, and that would be your value. So if you do something like, for instance, somebody changed the margin in the browser, you're going to see the margin will change. You need to pass pixels to that. So I'm passing the px directly within the value, right? If it's a percentage or perk, then I'm passing added a percent sign to the string value of the value, right? If it's a URL, for instance, if you have a background image, you can have it so that an input text box says, hey, here's a URL, use this as a background URL. Again, there's no URL in this example, but I wanted to show you how you would do that in this. And then once we have all of the values associated to that, so all the different attributes that we're doing, the variables, we're then saying, hey, that connection that we made at the beginning, how about you emit something to that, that is the submit update layout, right? Remember that function that we were listening to in the application, that submit update layout? Pass that with a variable of 3 different options. That selector text, the attribute, and the value, right? So the selector text is what we got from the selector, the item that we captured from. The attribute being that attribute dataset item, and the value, the thing that we just parsed and made sure that we're doing the right value. Pass it to the server. The server's going to say, hey, I got that. Now pass it to everybody else, right? We're going to then prepare all the elements, and then we're going to say, hey, that connection, at the end of setting all these different functions up, listen for anything that says update layout and perform that remote update layout, right? So anytime you change the thing or change any of those attributes on your browser, it's not changing it directly. It's sending instructions to the server, and then the server's sending it back to you, and that's what's changing it. So the speed at what you see a lot of this change at is the response time back and forth from to the server, right? So I'm going to jump over into the server here, and as I can see, definitely been some changes. In fact, what's very interesting, so I'm going to first and foremost show this. This is in Google Chrome. This isn't Canary, this is just standard flat Google Chrome. On a Mac, you're going to see that, yes, you have left and right. Now, there's a bit of a delay on this, but it's instant on my screen here. Same thing for the right. Left for the padding, right for the padding, and then you have padding top and bottom. Border radius, somebody's been playing with, which is funny, but border radius functions as well, right? Changing in a select box, for instance, to a serif or a sans serif, easy as that. And then font size, right? Going up and down. Because it's an input that allows for keyboard or even mouse functionality, scrolling functionality, I can do things like smoothly scroll up and down, right? Fun thing, on a Mac and in Google Chrome Canary, it has a built-in, or it uses the built-in color picker. And if you do something crazy, like say changing to HSB, changing the saturation to 100%, and then changing the hue, you can perform this rainbow-like effect, right? Please, for the love of all that is holy in Gutenberg, do not do this in an actual project, but it's interesting to see how you can have this type of thing, right? But this isn't just Canary, right? What's very good about this technology is I'm going to open up and I'm going to switch over. Here is 4 other different browsers that I have running on another computer here. This is Firefox right here. You have Chrome Standard. You have Chrome Canary. That's not what I wanted to do. And then you have Internet Explorer, right? Internet Explorer 10. Any one of these browsers all work with the same way. So if I switch back to over here and I say, hey, you know that top margin or the left margin? Let's adjust this, right? That's every one of those browsers is connected to the server and doing this dynamically on the fly. If I go to any of these browsers and I say, oh, let's take a look at the Chrome Canary, right? Again, the color one or the color picker for Chrome Canary is a built-in one. I can do that same thing and saying, hey, look at this. Let's do this rainbow gradient, right? Now, some of the browsers don't seem to be connecting up just as fast, but they're still all very, very quick, right? If I do something like go to a browser that doesn't support some of the input types, like for instance, IE, what you can do, because it's a text input, you can do other things other than just this slide picker. If you know the values that you want, you can do things like RGBA 0.5, which gives us this transparent or translucent at 50% opacity. Tab out, and now we have a transparent background directly from that. And all the browsers that at least support WebSockets should allow for that. Again, font size, not possible for input, but it still shows up as text. So the second input, numbers, I can toss in there 144, and there's 144 text. If you do something like a slider, I'm going to drop that back down to 10 or 13, sorry. Sliders work the same thing. So a slider in all those different browsers work in the same manner, right? So sliders in IE, slider in Firefox works slightly different, but it still is a slider. A slider in Firefox will not provide you that update until you've let go of the click, which is different than most other browsers, but it does provide you that method of controlling as well, right? So if I say padding on the left is this much, it's not going to update until I've let go of my mouse. So keep that in mind if you're thinking of Firefox. But again, Serif, that's fine. Sans serif, that's fine. Ubuntu, there you go. All of these things work just like you'd expect. If you're in a browser like Chrome, well, the original or the basic Chrome gives you that color input, which is based on your operating system. So on a PC, you have this color picker here, which will require me to pick a color first, then click OK. As soon as I click OK, that's when it sends that command. Right? So some inputs aren't instantly changing, some inputs are. As soon as that changed event triggers, that's when you know what's happened. So what else is good about this is for anybody that is on the stream right now, feel free to change things around. I did take a look earlier on this evening, actually this camera, earlier on this evening, and I did confirm all of the different browsers on mobile devices do work with this. The downside is not all browsers support all input types, but it does mean that on Chrome, on the Android devices, and Safari, and Windows Mobile, and Windows Desktop, the RT, all have the capabilities of doing WebSockets and these input types. So if you are running on a mobile device, you can do the same thing here. So I'm going to change the background color on my Android device here, and I'm going to say change it to cyan. Now again, browser works slightly different. I need to choose a color. Say, for instance, I'm going to do this horrible green, and then as soon as I click set, instantly all the browsers changed. If you were there watching this, I should have cut this up, but all of the browsers would change the exact same time. So this means that you can control things like margins and padding directly. So let me see if I can just pull this up here, switch over. So if I change on a mobile device, right, again, you're going to see that's super smooth for being through a mobile device to a laptop. You can set up computers to respond directly to mobile devices over the net, right? Right now, I think I am on the same network as this, but it doesn't matter. I'm going through the server. So the speed is technically as your connection to the WebSocket. So that is the current example. If you want to play with that, please, by all means, I will be keeping this up for some time. If I do end up changing the location of this, for instance, creating a specific subdomain for streaming Sundays, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it so that all the video or all of the URLs that I previously had will pass through to that. But you should be able to go at least there for the next few weeks if you want to play around with this and try it out. I do recommend downloading the sample code. You can also catch the sample code through a GitHub account at github.com/htmltoronto. If you do have any questions, by all means, reach out. Love to hear what you guys think of this. Some practical applications, for instance. What would be a really good method of doing this where you capture or you try to give users the ability to do this type of thing, right? Have control over top of their CSS and be able to interact with other people through this. Similar to what Journey did for, say, gaming developers, where you're creating an experience for the user by other users. It'd be really interesting to see that type of thing on a website. So that being said, I'm going to leave you guys with that. Again, thanks for everybody who came out tonight. I do see a bunch of people commenting now about the audio. It's working great, which is awesome. Glad it's a lot better than it was last week. I do, again, apologize for that. But not much I can do about it now. It was bad software or inconsistent software. But yeah. If you guys have any ideas for next week and what you want to see, by all means reach out. Either next week or the following week. What I'm planning on doing is walking through something like Windows Azure as a first-time run. I've signed up for an account. I've got an account, but haven't done anything with it. Like literally nothing. Open up the account, put it in, and what I want to do is I want to show and really see for myself how easy it is to set one up and set up a platform and set up a system. So if you're interested in that type of thing and to see how easy or hard or difficult or what things come up as you're setting something up, let me know. Put it down in the comments or not, as well as any tutorials, tips, tricks, anything that you want to see us try or give examples for. I'd love to hear your input on. Other than that, have yourselves a great week and hopefully see you guys next week. Cheers.